Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Paradise, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm born and raised in Connecticut, residing in East Windsor, and a working mother of two and wife to a volunteer firefighter. I participated as an intervener in the Connecticut Siting Council process for a large-scale utility solar expansion project in our town. I support Bill 5551, Section 9, and will focus on my experience with the Siting Council process. Over the past year, I learned a complex legal system as a regular citizen hoping to protect my town. What I witnessed is deeply troubling. Let me be clear, we are not against solar or renewable energy. We are against the industrialization of irreplaceable prime farmland and a process that fails to protect it. 2,330 locals voiced their opposition in our petition. We submitted testimony, evidence, and expert concerns, and still, the outcome felt predetermined. When you look at the data, the Siting Council approves nearly 90% of their projects, which reinforces that perception. Why? Because the system favors the developer. The developer controlled the timeline, limited extensions, and their council controlled how information was presented and challenged. Residents were expected to navigate that system in real time without council. That is not a level playing field. A council member with agricultural expertise was removed from the vote at the request of the developer for a perceived conflict of interest. The public was never notified. Since no replacement was provided, that expertise was missing from the final decision. Because this project was labeled as an expansion, our town was denied access to funding we would have received under a new application, which was expected for a project of this scale and size. We have already spent thousands of taxpayer dollars on legal fees and must spend more to appeal. Meanwhile, state guidance for siting solar on agricultural land remains unfinished. So projects are being approved on prime farmland without clear standards. That is a regulatory failure. We are told these projects will power thousands of homes, but the energy is sold into regional markets while our community absorbs the full impact. Loss of farmland, environmental change, and public safety and fire concerns. These are not solar farms. They are industrial power plants built on farmland. Calling these solar farms is an insult to real farms and to the farmers who work them. Our town is projected to host around 30% of the state's grid-scale solar. That is not balance. Another project is already moving forward in our town, and neighboring communities are next. We are told farmland will be protected, but now we have neighborhoods at risk of being surrounded. That is not protection. So I ask you, reform this process. Finalize agricultural siting standards before approving more projects. Stop procedural loopholes that override local planning. Set limits on overconcentration. And ensure public participation actually matters, because right now residents can do everything they are asked to do and still not be heard. This is not just about one project, it is about whether Connecticut will protect its farmland or continue to sacrifice it under the illusion of progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Ms. Paradise, what efforts in your situation did the Siting Council make to reach out, solicit feedback, or explain in lay terms what was going on to your local populace?
So they provided us the opportunity to participate as an intervener in the process, which allowed us to present interrogatories to the developer, which meant, asking questions, getting answers. The reason we don't feel heard is because a lot of what we said didn't hold as much weight as we actually don't even know how much weight it held. And so the process didn't feel transparent. We were really kind of learning legalities as we went along. And so it just felt like a battle we were never meant to win. As I mentioned, the developer had the edge the whole time. They led the process, and we were just there to voice our opinions and participate, but that was about it. It didn't truly feel like we were heard at all.
Okay, it sounds like there was no real explanation of why your concerns were disregarded.
Well, they do provide you a lot of links to a lot of websites with a lot of legal jargon that I am still learning a year later, and it's a very difficult process for regular public participants.
Appreciate that. And we received testimony from Eversource indicating that the bill's requirement that a Eversource testified that they believe that the bill's requirement that a municipality hold a public information session represents an unwarranted mandate on the municipal governments and intruded on local authority. Do you think that your municipality would have found that an intrusion, or would that be something that they would have liked to have had before the decision was made?
I'm not sure I follow what you said. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Could
so
you say
were
that
there any
differently?
public information sessions, anything like that?
We actually asked the developer in our interrogatories, which just means questions, whether or not they were going to plan to hold a public session, and they actually said that they were in fear of some of the things that they had read online. And so I challenged them because they actually had an Excel chart of how many people had basically sworn in their emails to them, and there were 2, literally just 2. And so they're talking about, Facebook groups or things they're hearing on social media, and that was the reason they never held a public meeting. And then we challenged them again, well, what about Zoom? And they never went. They didn't want public participation.
Do you think a public hearing, or excuse me, not a public hearing, but a public information session would have been helpful?
Yes, absolutely, because the developer would say along the way that they would take our feedback, but we got into this process so far after the fact, and even the fire department, they would talk to one person in the fire department and not the entire staff, like talk to the fire marshal in one piece and then the fire chief in another, and everybody, they just weren't talking to the right people at the right times, and they were only kind of doing it in reaction to what we would bring up during the hearing, just after the fact, to satisfy the fact that we've brought up, like, you haven't had these conversations yet. So it just, everything was done in reaction to what we would bring up, and way too long after the fact.
Okay. And sorry, I know you said before, but what town was this in?
East Windsor, which
Okay, East
holds
Windsor.
the largest industrial scale solar in all of not only Connecticut, but New England, and it's on its way to 30% of the state's renewable energy.
Wow.
Which is oversaturation and then too much of a burden for one community to bear.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your testimony and for bringing these issues to our attention.
Thank you for
Appreciate being
listening, and thank you, Jamie, for supporting me and being here, because I was very nervous.
You did great.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.